Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name's Dave Smith, Gutenberg core team member and full-time WordPress contributor. And I'm pleased to say I'm joined here today by Adam Zielinski, who's been the core editor tech lead for WordPress 6.0 and is also a colleague of mine at Automatic.
Hey, Dave, thank you so much for having me. As you mentioned, I worked with a 6.0 release on the release squad as a tech editor lead. I work in Automatic, same as you do, full-time on a WordPress. And well, I like improv comedy and bouldering and making jewelry, like too much stuff. Like I'm diagnosed with ADHD, so there's no shortage of things we can talk about. Well, let's try to keep ourselves focused on WordPress 6.0 today. Hopefully we'll be able to get to end of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, WordPress 6.0 has just been released, I think 2 days ago now. I think we're recording this on the 26th of May, 2022. It was released on the 24th. All seem to go very smoothly. And from what I can see, it's been pretty well received, actually. Do you agree?
I do agree. And I'm actually really surprised how well it all turned. So there's been a bunch of as a release lead, you never know when the process happens, how is it going to turn out in the end? In hindsight, well, it's always clear, right? As with everything in life. But when these things happen, like when there's a WordPress 6.0 beta 1, and it's the time where the feature freeze, you have to stop merging new things and focus only on bug fixes. And you have to make decisions. Then what kind of features are going to end up being in the final release? What kind of features do we have to say no to? And man, that's really hard sometimes, but it went really well. There were no delays along the way. There were no major hiccups. We've had some more heated debates about some of the features, for example, web fonts. It's been long delayed. I'm just super happy to see all the focus on little details in this new WordPress release.
It's a solid release. It's definitely a good improvement on what landed in 5.9. But I'm conscious of time, so I want to ask you a little bit about being the core editor release lead for this WordPress 6.0. Seems like it would be a big responsibility, but for those people who are watching probably might not know what that role involves. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
You're in a good company. A few weeks ago, I had no idea either. And I was quite confused and nervous about the role at the beginning. I thought, wow, WordPress 6.0, that's a big release. Tech editor lead, that's I'm not sure if I can handle that. That sounds like a big responsibility. And frankly, it was, but it's been also a great journey. So being a part of release squad, you get a lot of support from all the other members, and anytime you're confused, they're going to help you out. So I've been in very good hands, fortunately. My co-lead was Grzegorz Ziłkowski, and we've been acting as a tech editor leads together, which also helped me a lot because Grzegorz prepared a bunch of the plumbing we have for releasing Gutenberg versions and backporting these changes into WordPress releases. So he had all the know-how that otherwise I would have to figure out from scratch, from the documentation bits. Maybe the documentation isn't always 100% up to date, so having Grzegorz around, it's been a perfect storm. Tech editor lead is mostly a communication role. So what you're responsible for is figuring out what is the scope of everything that may possibly ever land in WordPress 6.0 in this case, and then figuring out which features from that huge list, which features realistically have a chance of being ready for the beta 1, right? So you take a very large list and then you try to narrow it down to a, reasonably sized, smaller list. This involves pinging a lot of people, asking them, hey, do you think this may be ready for a beta 1? And it worked, fairly well for most of the features where people said yeah, this is certainly going to be ready, or this is certainly not going to be ready. But there was a gray area, such as the web fonts API we've been talking about earlier. So it's been a very requested feature. A lot of people wanted to see it in WordPress 6.0, and I think it's been even bumped from the previous version. So
it was.
Yeah,
it was.
And so there was this heated debate, like we really want to have this feature, but the API doesn't seem to be really mature. And once we merge the API, we will have to support it forever.
Exactly.
So, oh, and I should add that I had no prior exposure to this feature whatsoever. So suddenly there's this huge topic that I have no idea about any of the details. And well, there's a decision to be made, right? Or at least a vote to be cast. What should we do here? So I had to spend a bunch of hours just diving into all the commits, all the history of the projects, looking into the arguments of both sides, and eventually give a recommendation what I think should be done. And great thing happened because the team working on that feature had this exact idea, and they knew how to make it done. So essentially, for the developers listening to this, they put all the APIs and classes and functions inside of a closure, so that it's not accessible from the outside, but you can still run all the code paths without exposing the API. It's a really smart way to handle that. So right now we have a feature, but how it's implemented, that's a detail, and we remain flexible.
That's a big it was a big area that could have thrown up a lot of problems, but the consensus was reached. And that's kind of like part of the your role and other people's roles as well, like coordinating how those things land, which ones do, which ones don't. It sounds like a lot of work, but also sounds like a lot of fun. And I know obviously Grzegorz is very experienced, so that would have helped, no doubt, on that sort of side. There's been a lot of debates around as well about the inclusion of experimental APIs from Gutenberg in core. That flared up quite a bit recently, and with good reason, I'll say, because essentially what we're talking about is Gutenberg does tend to need to iterate fairly quickly, and it includes APIs under a prefix with the _ experimental, so _ experimental function name. And the understanding from some people was that was a contract that developers used at their own risk. But because these APIs are ending up in a stable release of WordPress core, many other folk felt that the contract then didn't apply. And actually, if they're in core, it's a considered stable API, which we should support forevermore. So I know you've been involved in that conversation, Adam, and I wondered if you had any thoughts about it.
Yeah, it's
really try and summarize the whole thing.
It's really went in the direction I didn't expect it to. So before every large WordPress release, we do create this issue in Gutenberg repository that's called audit all experimental APIs. And then there's a script that just takes all the function names and attributes, like React attributes from the code base that are prefixed with like _ experimental, and creates an issue. So for this release, for the first time in history, the output of that script, the list of all the experimental APIs, they exceeded the number of allowed characters for a GitHub issue. And this,
it's not great.
This raised a bunch of red flags for me. I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure this shouldn't happen, right? Like maybe we have one or two too many. Well, it turns out we had 280 experimental APIs right now. And some of them go back, like 5-10 Gutenberg releases. They were introduced in the past. They are de facto, used by a lot of extenders by today. And we also use them inside Gutenberg, like very freely, I would say, right? They lost their de facto experience. I have to be careful with words here because this is such a heated debate going on in GitHub right now. So what happened is that there's essentially, as you said, Dave, a big debate. What should we do about these experimental APIs? And the two sides of the argument go more or less like this. One side says, well, Gutenberg is a plugin. On our roadmap, there is a lot of things that have never been done in the history of the web. Like the entire idea of editing, of full site editing, there is a bunch of products out there that do it, right? But there isn't a single solution that allows you to do anything you might want to do with your site. Maybe other than, like web development IDEs where you can edit code. But from a user perspective, it's not a solved problem yet. So in Gutenberg, we're trying to solve a huge problem like that goes back 30 years since the inception of the web. And so sometimes we need to do things just to see how they work. And then we must retain the ability to phase them out, right?
Yeah.
Which is the entire idea behind the experimental APIs. On the other side of the debate, there's the argument that, well, that's fine for the plugin, and plugin may have its own policy and rules, but once these things are merged into core, well, core has its own handbook and policy.
It does.
And set of rules. And so once an API makes it to a core, well, we have to retain backwards compatibility indefinitely. Otherwise, we are going to be breaking people's plugins, websites, themes.
Yeah.
And we don't want to do that, right? Like WordPress is very dedicated to keeping things working across releases.
Exactly.
So both sides of this debate have very good points. And now we're trying to find a way to, well, be able to try things and remove them and make mistakes. And at the same time, don't break the internet. And one way of approaching that, like one inspiration actually comes from the Web Functions API that we discussed earlier, where that very capable team figured out a way to ship the feature without exposing the implementation details / any kind of APIs or functions. So maybe we can do the same thing in the Gutenberg. I don't know. This is a very active discussion right now. We will have to see where it goes. Yeah.
It is. I mean, it's a heated topic. You can see the arguments on both sides are really solid. What I was pleased to see was that despite the strongly held views on both sides, that the effort on everyone involved is to sort of do the right thing by the users and the consumers and the extenders of WordPress, and that's really the key, because that's what we're all working for. Eventually, what we're talking about is like the technicalities of how we preserve that. But I'm confident we're going to find a way that we can find a middle ground where we still have that ability to iterate and experiment, but also fulfill that contract that we have in WordPress with the backwards compatibility, which is so important.
One of the things that we've also done during the release, like the release process. So there's a schedule. You get a beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, and then you get like release candidate 1, 2, 3, in this case also 4, and then only then you get a stable version. So between every 2 releases on the schedule, you get a bunch of bug fixes and occasionally larger changes merged into the Gutenberg code base, and then you have to merge them back into the WordPress core. That used to be a super manual process where you had to go to GitHub, find all these issues that have to be merged, and then you had to cherry pick them in your console. And then you had to release the Gutenberg packages, and then you had to go to the WordPress develop repository and manually update the version numbers in package.json, and then. There used to be a very lengthy process. Me and Grzegorz managed to create a bunch of scripts that automate that quite a lot. And right now you can, well, there's a script that cherry picks changes for you. So you only have to label them on GitHub, and then you run the script, and then it attempts to cherry pick every single one of them on the top of your branch. If anything fails, it then tries to cherry pick these failed commits in hope that they will apply cleanly after you merge the ones that succeeded. And it just keeps retrying and trying until everything fails like twice in a row. And then once you push that, you can release the Gutenberg packages from the GitHub. And then on WordPress core side, you can just run a script that finds the latest versions of these packages, updates them for you, and then finds any blocks that are now enabled in Gutenberg as stable production blocks and update that straight in the code base. So that's something that used to be like a couple of hours long manual process right now boils down to just running a bunch of scripts. So the hardest part of this is just communication and figuring out which features and bug fixes they actually want to include in the next release.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like a really valuable work that no doubt is going to benefit the next people who end up doing the role that you've done. So yeah.
Hopefully that's the idea.
Yeah.
So far it's been like just me and Grzegorz being programmers and spending 100 hours to save 3 hours, right?
Yeah, it will definitely pay back. The dividends will be there, I'm sure. Absolutely. So yeah, it was really interesting, that overview of you as release lead. It sounds like well, from what I've heard, the feedback I've got, you Jagos did a great job. I've only heard good things. So yeah, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
But like talking about features, I mean, there's been quite a few in this release, right? Is there anything that's stood out, notable for you?
Yeah, patterns are available to you whenever you create a new page. So now you can, like, if you want to create an about page, that's one click away, or a contact form, or list of products, any of that. And that we have a style variation. So if your site is, say, in a graphite color palette, and you'd prefer more red or blue, or really anything that's available, you can just single click on a different style, and the color palette, the fonts, the margins, like, they all adjust to this new styling. And then we've had, besides that and web fonts, we have a new block for comments. So comments so far used to be, even though we transitioned to full site editing, they used to be implemented in the, do I want to say legacy? I will say legacy way, where you just call the PHP function and it rendered all the comments and the form and pagination and all that. And now you can embed that as a block and configure that block right in the editor. So that's a big improvement. And I've been admittedly quite nervous about it before beta 1, just because it seemed such a huge project with so many improvements to be done, which is part of stressing out about the release. As the release, you never know how these things are going to be turned out. So we enabled it provisionally in WordPress 6.0 beta 1, under the condition that, like, we're only going to keep it if it's stable by the time we hit the first release candidate. And the team working on that feature honestly did a fantastic job. They delivered so much more than I expected. And thanks to that, now we have this feature in. One of the other things that I'm really happy about in this new release is a bunch of small improvements. Like, we don't deliver just big features. We also made the editing experience so much more pleasant and fluent. There's this feature that's been requested like since forever, where you can now select text like halfway through one of your blocks, and then drag that across the block all the way to like 10 blocks down, like 3 blocks down, and end it like halfway in another block. And you can just copy this snippet of text without copying the entire block structure. And it used to be like that forever, that when you do this partial selection thing, you copy all the blocks. Well, not anymore.
And that just all helps to make it feel, like a native, like a comfortable experience. If you're coming from another editor, you come into a Gutenberg and it just feels normal. So that's all good. Yeah, but it was a nice balance, this release. I felt it was WordPress 5.0 was a huge deal, wasn't it? It was the release of full site editing. There was this big thing landing, and there was all the sort of controversy about the release being delayed because the feature's not there. We didn't have any of this with 6.0, right? We didn't really have any concerns that people said no to things and they didn't get into the release. Is that right?
Yes, it went surprisingly well. So even in WordPress 5.9, right? Like there's been this shifting the release cycle. Things weren't ready, and we may have merged some features after feature freeze, which didn't help the entire case. Right now in WordPress 6.0, it seems like the process was much smoother. Thankfully, due to the learnings from the previous versions, we were able to literally visualize the consequences of saying yes to certain things, which made it much easier to say no, frankly, right? Like when you can specifically say, well, I would really like to have this feature, but if it's past the feature freeze, exactly, right? Like look what happened the last time, so I don't want to go through that again. So like things happened really on schedule, and we released on the date that was originally planned for that, which is a big success.
It really is, and it shows. I think it shows that the that people are listening to the concerns that are raised by the community, and things are changed as accordingly. So that's really, really good, and it's a positive thing. I think that the common theme seems to be now that FSE, full site editing, if that's the sort of bubble we're putting it under, is giving people like too much power, if anything, and it's too much. Like, we can't disable all these things. Do you agree with that sentiment that seems to be going around?
I do kind of agree with it. Yes, like full site editing gives, in fact, people a lot of power, which means if you are say a web agency, you have customers, you prepare sites for them, and now you give them this entire kitchen sink where they can do anything to the site. Like, it's really easy to, well, delete something you didn't intend to delete, or Gutenberg exposes like tons of controls, so you can customize all your margins, all your fonts, or your colors. Well, maybe now you messed up your entire site, right? So there absolutely must be a way to restrict that. Maybe switch to like disable margin editing, or like fonts, or maybe like even per user settings. I think, Dave, you had an idea about restricting that in theme.json.
One of the things I was thinking is that sort of you can use theme.json to enable features. Like, you can say, I want to enable padding control, I want to add colors control, and then the UI will show those things. But you want to kind of be able to restrict that by role. And you can do that. I mean, I've in their presentation, which I'll put a note to here in the video, you can do that, but it's via PHP filters. So it does require like a certain level of knowledge and awareness to do that. But I was thinking it would just be so much easier, instead of having to jump through those filter hooks, if you could just say in theme.json, instead of just a Boolean flag of, is this thing on or off, you could also have an array-based syntax or something which says, list the user roles that you want this to be enabled for. So you'd be like editor, contributor, author, maybe for color, but then for something else, you might just say, oh no, this one only for admin, and absolutely the sort of the way we could approach it. I mean, surely that must be something that we've considered. So it'd be a good way to help curate that experience a little bit more. No, I was just going to say, I mean, it feels like, there's that option in theme.json where it's appearance tools, true or false. And if you make it true, then like it automatically defaults a number of UI controls that are around appearance to be on or off. And that's like just a one switch flag. And it'd be almost like if you had something like that carried on, as the new features are added, you can kind of have a contract that says, as long as you've got this set to false, you're not going to get all these extra things appearing. So if you're an agency, you've handed over the site to a client, you set that to false, you don't have to worry that suddenly, the new border control is going to pop up and they're going to go, ooh,
yes,
like that. So that's some sort of contract around that would probably introduce some more stability as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought it might be quite nice if we looked at your top 3 picks for the features in WordPress 6.0 on the Gutenberg side, at least. I know you've got some ideas and you've prepared some demos, so I thought we could take a look at that now, if that's all right.
Absolutely, let's do that. So my very first favorite feature from the 6.0 release is page creation patterns. And the way it works is that, say we're in WP admin right now, it's just a vanilla WordPress installation. Say you create a new page. Well, this is the screen that you used to see, and this isn't going anywhere. But the cool thing about 6.0 is that a developer may give you an additional, say, onboarding type of thing on a screen. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's do a demo, shall we? So this is the editor, and it's just a vanilla WordPress installation with 2022 theme in it. I'm going to modify that theme and create a directory called patterns. There we go. And then in that patterns directory, I'm just going to create a, say, demo pattern. So this is an empty file right now, and there is a post where you can find the snippet of code that I'm about to paste in here. I'm just going to roll with it. So if I paste this special snippet in here that says what's the pattern name and slide and a bunch of details that are described in details in dev notes, I save this file. Let's see what happens in the editor. So I refresh the page, and magically, WordPress proposes me to start with one of the prepared patterns. So this feature is quite powerful because it turns your experience as a page creator from working with blank canvas and scratching your head, what should I put in here, into more of a, oh, do I want an about page? Do I want a contact page? Do I want to show my products in here? And then you just click one of the options that were prepared for you and, well, roll with it and modify it to your heart's content. So one pretty cool thing about it is like, as if you noticed, right, like there is the only pattern available in here is hello pattern that I just created out of thin air. So you're a bit restricted to what the developer prepares, but because we do have and I'm going to clean this, we do have a pattern directory. There's a nice little trick. You can go to patterns and say, we're interested in videos, right? So I'm going to paste the video pattern in here, just use this. And I can copy the code of that pattern that's already, well, existing in a patterns directory, and I can paste it in here. So if I save that, I essentially get a page creation pattern for free. And I do really want to create a new page to demo that. So add new blank page. Here's the pattern straight from the patterns directory, right? So you don't even have to create it from scratch. You can just reuse any pattern that already exists sort of out in the wild.
It's really powerful. It's really good for developers as well, theme developers, because you can actually construct these patterns in the editor, copy all the content, paste them into your PHP file in the patterns directory, put the right metadata in, and hey presto, you've got your page template already pre-prepared. It's a pretty good feature, I think. Like when you're starting a new page and you can give your clients, oh, would you like this type, this type, this type? It's very powerful. I mean, what we've just demoed here is only the basics. We're scratching the surface. So
exactly,
it's great.
It's going to be so much more powerful in the future. And this also ties into this entire discussion about restricting the editor powers, right? Not giving everything out there to the user. So this page creation patterns that you can see in here, well, this is only what the developer prepares, right? You don't have all the patterns from the pattern directory in here. So that's kind of a glimpse of where the pattern directory could go potentially in the future. And this also feeds nicely into my other favorite feature, which is global style variation. So let me create that page and, well, films, let me call it films. So I open the page we just created, films, on the website. Now let's see, now we're in a site editor. So currently the site is all in dark colors and a specific font and margins. And say I don't like it. I would like to explore a different typeface and a color palette. Well, we do get a few styles shipped with that theme. So for example, I can change it to blue or to pink or to Swiss. And the cool part about it, let's do pink. The cool part of it is that when I hit save and I go to the films page and I refresh, well, notice that the pattern that I inserted earlier is also affected by the style change. So it's not like you have to change the style of the layout first and then go to each one of your pages and modify that. No, you get all of that for free as long as you use full site editing.
Yeah, that's interesting because I suppose I had a question about this on a presentation I gave recently. One of the concerns was that once you've authored a pattern and you sort of style it and everything, if you then, if the client wants to then change the colors of that pattern, you can't easily go and do that. But I guess if you register the content you're using in your pattern, if you register that through theme.json, you style it through configuration in there a little bit, then you can take advantage of these things, because when you change the values in theme.json, which is effectively what those global style variations are, then the pattern will automatically take on those new values.
Yeah, exactly like that. And we can even show it more in a more live way, say, let me just insert a pattern right in the site editor. Now I'll just choose a random one, let's say like large list of names. That's how this one is called. Well, it's just a random pattern, but again, right, it changes. So exactly as you say, in the world of block themes, I'm quite hazy on what theme actually means, right? Because the abstraction that spans like all block themes is a block. So you can, and blocks can be grouped into patterns. So as long as you have a group of blocks that you can put into any theme that you want, like in theory, it should look decently in any single theme. And that's what we're seeing here, right? Like by changing styles, you would argue that we're, well, kind of changing a theme, really. And all the blocks and patterns follow.
Yeah, it definitely feels like what would have happened if you, to get this experience in classic WordPress, you'd have had to go to the themes tab, change to a completely new theme, and it would have been, it'd have been totally different. But here we're just variations on the same essential structure. Very, very powerful. And it also shows that, you know, where the way of styling themes is going, because it's probably the less custom CSS that you use in your theme, the more chance you have of that theme sort of being compatible with blocks that are dropped in from other themes. So it makes your theme more attractive to people, because they know that if they're on this old theme and this theme is not really updated, they can switch to your theme, and all those blocks that they had will just automatically look right in the new theme, unless, you know, unless there's loads and loads of CSS involved. So it's quite a powerful demonstration of like the value of the global styles project and Theme.json for styling things. So yeah, I like that. I hadn't really thought of it in this in editor mode. It's really cool.
Yeah, I hope that that's where we were going. As you said, right? Like if all this CSS lives at a block level, it's not really tied to your specific theme, like its name and slag. Well, everything should just work. I'm sure there are kinks right now and some hiccups. Bear with WordPress. Hopefully, we're going to iron all of this out in a couple of releases. This is all that exploratory work in progress. It's also stable, right? Work. It ties back to the experimental features. I don't want to get into that right now. One of my other favorite features is that right now in WordPress 6.0, you have the ability to embed the featured image in your post using blocks. So the way it used to work so far was that whenever you edited a post and you wanted to have featured image in it, you had to go to the post editor, go over to settings, set featured image, choose one, click it, and it worked. It's not the most convenient way. It's very easy to forget about. And then when you hit update and you view that post, well, that featured image is here, but it's not in the editor. So visually, you cannot see how it relates to your, right? Exactly. And we really want this one-to-one relationship. So what you can do in WordPress 6.0 is you can set the cover block, you can create a cover block. And then this little button here is labeled use featured image. And if I click it, there it goes. I have a cover block with a featured image that WordPress recognizes as like using these meta attributes. So my great post, let's do it just like that. Write something in here. And if I update it and I view my post, that's this tab really. So my cover block is here, but you may notice something undesired, like there's a cover block with my featured image, and here's my featured image separately. But what you can do today is, well, thanks to full site editing, let's see, this is the post editor, the one that we've seen earlier. I'm just going to close this and this. So notice that there's this accordion section here that says template. And for now, it's single post, no separators. This is the default template for your post in 2022. What you can do is you can hit edit. And this is the post template in the full site editor that you can customize to your heart's content. So as you may notice, like there's the post title, there's the featured image, there's the post content with a cover block that has featured image inside of it. We don't want this one right here. So I'm just going to select it, hit delete, update my post template, and voila, there we go. Right.
The power of foresight right there.
Exactly. That used to be
previously
never possible
and
before.
ask your developer or jump into PHP to do that, right? If you want to edit the template. So
right now it takes some figuring out. It takes some additional clicks. We're very aware of it, and we're going into a better place with that, hopefully. But it is possible, right? And it didn't used to be. So that's a progress, and hopefully we'll make even better one in the future. So another cool thing about the blocks is that, and this feeds into the entire discussion about restricting editor features. Well, it's a step towards that. Namely, you can select, say, I group these two blocks. I want them to be grouped. And I can go to the options menu and select lock. And then I can lock specific block features. So maybe I don't want these blocks to be moved around. Maybe I don't want them to be removed. And I hit delete. Well, it cannot be deleted, right? There isn't a delete button in here. I would have to unlock it. Well, when I think about this right now, it would be ideal if locking a parent block would also lock all the child blocks, right? So what I really want to happen is I want to lock everything in here.
So it's hierarchical, it would just automatically flow, cascade down to all the child blocks. Yeah, so you were, when you were showing it before, you were able to delete that inner block, but if you tried to delete the parent group block, it wouldn't let you do it. So yeah, what we need is it to say, yeah, if you lock the parent, make sure the children are automatically locked. Yeah. But it's I think it's the first iteration of that block lock. I mean, block locking shipped in 5.9, but the first iteration we've had a UI for it. So
yes,
and I know for a fact that feature or bug or feature thing we need is something that's on the roadmap for the people who've been focusing on this. It's they're painfully aware of it. Yeah, but we can't do everything in one go. But it's it's showing where this stuff is going, definitely.
I also want to show post comments as a block. So I can now create a comments query loop. Well, we can customize this template just because it's a template like any other one. It's a full site editing world now. So for example, I may want to add, well, I don't know, let's add a separator just because we can. And let's
update. Put a background around it. You can do things
yeah, we should be able to.
Maybe on the columns you can.
Oh yeah, there we go. Well, let's use a light blue one, shall we?
Yeah, that looks good.
There we go.
Imagine this paired with patterns. So you could have patterns for your comments instead of all WordPress sites looking the same with the same comments layout for every single WordPress site, unless you can be bothered to dive into the PHP and use all the different arguments and change it, add the CSS. Instead of that, you just go, oh, actually, I'm going to change this like tiled comment layout or something. Like there's the possibilities just open up, don't they, when you start to realize the theme authors have got so much scope now.
Exactly.
As these blocks mature and they get more options for styling and patterns get better, it really opens up a new world of flexibility for everyone. That's a great overview of just some of the features that have landed in WordPress 6.0, and we can see where this stuff is going. The promise is there for some things are more fully realized than others, but it's definitely going in a really good direction, I'd say.
Yeah, I really enjoy looking how all of that moves forward, and every version just gives more power back to the users. Honestly, as a blogger, as a page creator, as a small business, there are things that you needed to ask the developer to do for you. Now you can do some of them yourself. And of course, there are arguments about too much power and not all of the features that we need being there, and there are issues, but the vector is such that the power is back with the creator without going through the code. And I really enjoy this, thinking about this vision, say a few months, a year, a few years into the future, hopefully we will see all of the kinks worked out, and this will be just a beautiful page creation and blogging machine.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope so. I think if you have anything to do with it, it certainly will be.
Thank you so much. You're very kind, Dave.
Yeah.
And likewise, you're an excellent developer, and I really enjoy working together.
I like this mutual appreciation society we have going on here. That's great. Well, thanks so much for joining me here today. It was really good.
Thank you for
really
having
good to
me.
have you. Yeah, and
absolutely.
We'll have you again on in the future, hopefully.
Thank you so much. Well, it's
All
been
right.
a pleasure, and thank you so much again.
See you soon.
Cheers.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.